She had always been there, until the night the western wall stood empty. For 3 years, Emma Collins attended every Grand Pack Ball in Moon Hall. She never wore jewels or entered beside a powerful family. In a plain cream dress, with her dark brown hair tied by a faded blue ribbon, she stood near the servants' passage where unranked Omegas could be present without ever becoming important. Emma told herself she attended because pack law required every unmated adult to appear. The greater truth stood at the center of the hall. Alpha King Grayson Whitmore was 34, black-haired, silver-eyed, and burdened by a crown that made every conversation feel like strategy. He danced with noble daughters when alliances required it, and listened to wealthy landowners until midnight. His gaze had crossed Emma's many times, but it never stayed. Yet she knew the small things about him. He disliked sweet wine. He touched the silver ring on his right hand whenever a counselor concealed something. He always looked toward the northern windows when the musicians played his mother's favorite song. She knew because 3 years earlier, the mate bond had awakened between them. Emma had been carrying medicine records through the eastern corridor when Grayson approached. His scent reached her first: cedar smoke, cold rain, and alpha power. Her wolf rose with one stunned breath. "Mate." Grayson stopped. Recognition flashed across his face, and his wolf surged beneath his skin. He knew. Then Counselor Alden Vale called him to a meeting, and Grayson walked away without acknowledging her. Emma waited for him to return. She waited through another day, another pack ball, and another winter. Nothing came. Grayson never rejected her. That would at least have forced him to admit the bond existed. Instead, he buried it beneath silence, believing distance would protect her from enemies who had once used his mother against the throne. Emma understood his fear. She did not understand why she had to pay for it. She continued working in the palace records office, correcting supply routes, and tracking medicine and grain sent to remote villages. At each pack ball, workers found her beside the western wall and slipped petitions into her hands. A widow needed roof timber. A healer needed fever root. A school had lost its winter coal. Emma followed every request until someone acted. No one praised her work. That was why powerful people allowed it to continue. On the night marking Grayson's 10th year as king, Emma arrived carrying a sealed ledger. It contained proof that Vale had diverted winter funds from 6 Omega districts into contracts benefiting noble estates. She joined the petition line, determined that this would be the final night she waited. Vale intercepted her before she reached the throne. "I submitted this evidence 7 times, Emma said. "And received your answer," he replied. "This cannot wait." Grayson looked toward them. The bond pulled sharply between him and Emma, and for one heartbeat she believed he would finally choose to listen. "Vali Bovid, a minor accounting matter, Your Majesty." At that moment, an ambassador arrived with news of a northern trade dispute. Grayson hesitated. He knew Emma's name. He knew what she was to him. Still, he turned toward the crisis everyone else could see. "Daniel can review it tomorrow." Emma's last hope went silent. Before dawn, she placed the ledger and her palace key on Beta Daniel Hayes' desk. Beside them, she left a note. "The people named inside cannot wait any longer. I will no longer remain the invisible path between them and a throne that refuses to see them." At sunrise, Emma left Blackwood City for Bracken Hollow. When the next pack ball began, Grayson entered Moon Hall and looked instinctively toward the western wall. The space beside the servants' passage was empty. His wolf growled. The bond beneath his ribs pulled hard enough to stop him mid-step. For the first time in 3 years, the Alpha King understood that Emma Collins was no longer waiting for him to see her. The first pack ball without Emma Collins appeared flawless. Silver chandeliers burned above Moon Hall. Musicians played beneath the Whitmore banners, and noble families gathered around the throne as though nothing had changed. Only the western wall was empty. Grayson noticed it the moment he entered. His gaze moved toward the servant's passage before the herald announced his name, and a mate bond beneath his ribs pulled hard enough to stop him mid-step. Emma was not there. His wolf paced restlessly inside him. But Counselor Vale approached with news of the northern trade negotiations, forcing Grayson to turn away. Grayson completed 2 discussions and signed a temporary agreement, yet his eyes kept returning to the empty wall. Emma had never arrived late. Before he could ask Daniel about her, a kitchen servant hurried toward the beta. "The western villages have not received their lamp oil," she said. Daniel frowned. The delivery was approved last week. The destination records were never corrected. A healer arrived next, reporting that fever root mint for Cedar Hollow had been diverted to a private clinic. Then a schoolmaster appeared with notices showing that his village's winter coal allowance had vanished. Within minutes, workers gathered near the servants' passage holding unanswered petitions and looking toward the place where Emma had always stood. By the end of the first dance, Daniel had collected 19 errors. Grayson followed him into a side chamber. "Explain." Daniel spread the petitions across the table. Emma usually connected these requests before they became crises. She was only a junior records clerk. "That was her title," Daniel replied. In practice, she tracked village requests, healer accounts, and warehouse corrections no one else bothered to connect. Grayson found Emma's initials on one petition, then another. Why did no one report this? The corrections were reported. "You approved the results without asking who produced them." The words landed because they were true. "Why is she absent?" Grayson asked. Daniel looked at him steadily. No one asked why she had stopped coming. He then brought out the sealed ledger Emma had left behind. Grayson read her note before opening it. "The people named inside cannot wait any longer. I will no longer remain the invisible path between them and a throne that refuses to see them." Inside were altered routes, missing funds, and rejected warnings linked to Vale's office. By sunrise, Grayson had ordered the Western accounts frozen and the Treasury records secured. A preliminary review identified 47 unresolved petitions, 11 suspicious shipment changes, and evidence that winter fund from 6 Omega districts had been diverted. That afternoon, Grayson rode to Emma's cottage. It stood dark and nearly empty. Her neighbor Ruth met him at the gate without bowing. "Emma left the morning after the last pack ball," she said. "Why Bracken Hollow?" "Because they listened when she spoke." "Will she return?" Ruth's expression hardened. For once, she stopped arranging her life around whether you might finally notice it. Grayson looked toward the southern road. 40 miles beyond the forest, Emma was building a life in a village that knew her name. Daniel drew his horse beside him. "When do we leave?" Grayson tightened his hand around the reins. "Now." Bracken Hollow lay 40 miles beyond Blackwood City, where the Royal Road narrowed into muddy paths between cedar trees. Grayson arrived with Daniel and 4 guards, expecting to find a neglected village waiting for royal aid. Instead, he found order. Workers repaired roofs before the rain. The public storehouse stood open beneath careful inventory. Children carried kindling toward the schoolhouse, and farmers waited beside a rough wooden table in the village square. Emma sat behind it with her sleeves rolled above her wrists and her dark hair tied away from her face. She looked nothing like the silent Omega who had once stood beside Moon Hall's western wall. Here, there was color in her cheeks and certainty in her voice. "Cedar Hollow can exchange medicine for flour," she told the farmer. "Record the agreement in both ledgers so neither village carries the debt alone." The man nodded. "Thank you, Emma." "Not Miss Collins. Not Omega. Emma." Grayson dismounted, and the square fell silent as the villagers recognized him. Emma raised her head. The mate bond came alive between them, sharp and undeniable. His wolf urged him forward, but Grayson forced himself to remain still. Emma's surprise lasted only a heartbeat before her expression became guarded. "Your Majesty." He had imagined this meeting throughout the journey. In none of those imagined versions had she sounded so calm. "I came to speak with you. I am working. I can wait." A murmur moved through the square. Kings did not wait for unranked Omegas. Emma studied him, then closed the ledger. 5 minutes. She led him beside the schoolhouse while Daniel remained at a respectful distance. Without the throne or council between them, every prepared explanation sounded weak. "I should have acknowledged you 3 years ago," Grayson said. Emma held his gaze. "You knew my name?" "Yes." "You felt the bond?" "Yes." and you chose silence. Grayson did not deny it. My mother was taken because my father's enemies knew she was his greatest weakness. Their deaths left the kingdom divided. When I recognized you, I believed hiding the bond would protect you. You never asked whether I wanted that protection. No, you never told me what I was being protected from. No, her voice remained steady. You made every choice for both of us, then called my pain necessary. The words struck cleanly. I was wrong. Emma looked toward the villagers waiting in the square. An apology is not repair. Then tell me what repair requires. She explained that Vale's office had buried her evidence through 7 different channels. The pack balls have been the only place where workers from remote districts could reach someone connected to the palace. They trusted Emma to carry requests through doors that remained closed to them. When you dismissed that ledger, she said, you did not only dismiss me. You dismissed every name written inside it. Grayson accepted the shame without defending himself. What do you want me to do? Restore the stolen funds. Investigate vale. Build a petition system that does not depend on one invisible woman standing against a wall. And what do you want from me? Emma's eyes hardened. Stop speaking as though I am another problem your crown can solve. Grayson lowered his head. Understood. Before returning to the square, Emma handed him a copied list of the 6 affected districts. You may investigate these accounts, but I will not return to Moon Hall because my absence has finally made you uncomfortable. Grayson folded the page carefully. I will not ask you to return until the hall is worthy of you. Emma's expression shifted slightly. It was not forgiveness, but it was the first sign that she believed he had finally listened. Grayson returned to Blackwood City and opened the Treasury Review before the entire council. Vale dismissed the missing funds as clerical errors, while several noble alphas warned that exposing old failures would weaken trust in the crown. Grayson listened, then placed Emma's ledger in the center of the table. These pages contain altered routes, missing funds, and villages that went without heat while noble estates received imported marble, he said. Trust will not be protected by hiding what the crown failed to see. Vale leaned forward. You are allowing an unranked Omega to shape royal policy. No, Grayson replied. I am allowing evidence to shape it. Merchants produced receipts. Healers testified about medicine that never arrived. Clerks admitted that Vale's office had ordered them to ignore petitions from Omega districts. Daniel also uncovered an unofficial category called low-priority domestic requests, used almost entirely for complaints submitted by Omegas, widows, servants, and unranked workers. Grayson abolished it that same afternoon. The investigation revealed something larger than scattered corruption. For years, Emma had served as the bridge between people the palace ignored and the systems they were forced to obey. Vale remained protected by council law until formal charges could be presented, but the pack's anger no longer remained hidden. At the next royal gathering, attendance fell by nearly a third. Most of the empty places belonged to Omegas and working families. What message are they sending? Lady Celeste Harrow asked. Daniel answered before Grayson could, that a gathering cannot represent the pack when half the pack is treated as decoration. Grayson canceled the opening dance and replaced it with an open grievance session. By midnight, the tables were covered with unresolved petitions. Then Daniel found a note beneath the ledger room door. Stop the inquiry, or the southern stores will close before winter. Those stores supplied grain to Bracken Hollow. Grayson's first instinct was to seize the warehouses and force obedience with an alpha command. Then he remembered Emma's accusation. Authority had become the only language he knew. He rode to Bracken Hollow without royal banners. Emma read the threat beside the village well. Vale controls the merchant contracts, she said. If you arrest him before securing another route, his allies will stop deliveries and blame the crown. What would you do? Grayson asked. Build a route they do not control. She spread a map across the stone edge. Agreements already connected millers, healers, farms, and village cooperatives. Supplies could move without noble warehouses. Grayson studied the lines. You prepared this before the threat, before you opened the ledger, because you expected retaliation. Emma met his eyes. Because people who survive being ignored learn not to depend on sudden kindness from power. Grayson did not defend himself. Will you help Daniel complete the network? I will help the villages, Emma said. That is not the same as returning to your service. Understood. She began explaining the alternate routes. This time, the Alpha King listened without interrupting. For the next month, Grayson traveled to places Whitmore kings rarely visited. He sat at the back table of Bracken Hollow's bakery while farmers argued over grain weights. He walked through Cedar Hollow's infirmary and learned that a royal shipment marked as delivered had arrived with half its crates missing. He followed roof workers through the rain as they pointed out homes excluded from repair grants because their residents had no ranked sponsors. Emma attended those meetings as a representative of the villages, not as the king's mate. She did not soften the truth for him. When Grayson suggested replacing corrupt officers with loyal nobles, she asked why the positions required noble blood at all. When he offered emergency gold, she reminded him that one payment would not repair a system designed to ignore certain names and seals. When he praised her courage, she told him she was tired of neglected people being admired for surviving what should never have happened. Grayson began writing more than he spoke. The villagers watched him change in small, unglamorous ways. He arrived on time. He carried his own documents. He let workers finish their sentences. When an elderly Omega named Martha Bell corrected his interpretation of storehouse law, he thanked her and amended the order in front of everyone. Emma noticed. She also noticed that he never mentioned the mate bond. One evening, after the village council left the bakery, rain tapped against the windows while a single lamp burned between them. You could command me to return, Emma said. I could. You could announce the bond and make refusing you nearly impossible. Yes. Why haven't you? Grayson looked down at his hands. Because anything gained through the pressure of my title would not be trust. Emma studied him. You learned that quickly. No, I learned it 3 years late. The honesty unsettled her more than another excuse would have. Grayson removed a folded document from his coat and placed it on the table. It was a proposed royal petition charter. Every resident, regardless of rank, would have the right to submit a complaint, receive a registered seal, and obtain a written response within 30 days. Independent clerks chosen by district councils would review unresolved cases. Pack balls would no longer be mandatory for unranked citizens, and every gathering would begin with an open assembly before any dancing. The authorship line remained blank. Why? Emma asked. Because it is not mine alone. You want my name on it. Only if you choose. Emma read every clause. She crossed out 3, rewrote 5, and added protection for clerks who reported interference. Grayson accepted every change except one. They argued over whether emergency decrees should bypass district review. Emma warned that no crisis should become an excuse for permanent control. Grayson insisted that some threats required immediate action. At last, they agreed on a 7A limit and a public explanation for every emergency order. It was the first decision they made together. When Emma handed the document back, their fingers almost touched. The mate bond warmed. Between them, she withdrew her hand first. Grayson did not reach after it. Outside, the rain began to ease. You may put my name on the draft, Emma said. It was not forgiveness, but it was no longer absence. The Winter Pack Ball was meant to restore confidence, but Vale's allies intended to use it to destroy Emma. By then, the Royal Petition Charter had gained support across 8 districts, while several high-rank families feared it would weaken the power they had protected for generations. Emma agreed to attend the open assembly, but refused the ceremonial dance. She entered Moon Hall through the main doors in a simple blue-gray dress, with no jewels, no escort, and no attempt to resemble the court's idea of a future Luna. For 3 years, she had stood unnoticed beside the western wall. Now every eye followed her. Grayson waited near the center of the hall, but did not approach until Emma gave him a small nod. Before the charter could be presented, Vale stepped forward carrying a packet of documents. Council law had protected his seat during the investigation, and he intended to use that protection one final time. Your Majesty, The council must review evidence concerning Miss Collins. Vale raised the papers. Unauthorized alterations to royal supply ledgers, false approvals, and the redirection of crown property. By her own handwriting, the Omega who claims to expose corruption has admitted to years of interference. Whispers spread through the crowd. Emma's face lost color, but she remained still. The documents were genuine. During emergencies, she had corrected routes and released supplies after officials ignored repeated warnings. Her choices had saved villages, but they had also violated royal procedure. Vale turned toward the nobles. This charter is not reform. It is an attempt by one ambitious Omega to legitimize her crimes and gain influence over the throne. The room waited for Grayson to protect the crown by stepping away from her. 3 years earlier, he would have chosen silence. Instead, he crossed the hall and stopped beside Emma. His wolf surged beneath his skin, demanding that he defend his mate with an alpha command, but Grayson restrained. This time, he would not replace truth with power. "Did you alter these records?" he asked. "Yes," Emma answered. "Why?" She faced the hall. "Because children in Cedar Hollow had fever, and their medicine had been redirected to a private noble clinic. Because Bracken Hollow's grain remained locked behind an approval counselor veil, delayed for 17 days. Because every lawful request had failed. Valis milit, a confession." "No," Grayson said. Context. Daniel displayed the original petitions, dates, and delivery records. They showed that Emma had acted only after official channels ignored urgent warnings. Still, Grayson refused to erase what she had done. "Emma Collins violated royal procedure," he said. "So did the officials who buried lawful petitions. The difference is that her violations delivered medicine and food, while theirs delivered profit." Vale's confidence faltered. Grayson placed his silver seal ring on the evidence table. "As king, I allowed a system to exist in which breaking procedure became more moral than obeying it. I will not punish the person who exposed that failure while protecting those who created it." He suspended Vale and every officer named in the ledger pending a public hearing. Then he turned to Emma. "You will not receive immunity because of the mate bond. You will receive the same open process this charter is meant to guarantee for every member of the pack." Emma understood. He was not rescuing her as his possession. He was defending a standard that had to remain fair even when the truth was difficult. For the first time, she stepped closer to him by choice. "Then let the hearing be public," she said. The public hearing lasted 4 days. Witnesses filled Moon Hall from the front steps to the upper galleries. The review panel included district judges, healers, and one neutral alpha from outside Whitmore territory. Farmers testified that Emma's unauthorized release of grain had kept families from abandoning their land. Healers confirmed that the medicine she redirected had stopped a fever outbreak in Cedar Hollow. Palace clerks described threats from Vale's office, while merchants admitted receiving favorable contracts in exchange for supporting his council votes. Emma testified last. She stood alone beneath the Black Wolf crest, with Grayson seated among the witnesses rather than above them on the throne. "I knew the rules," she said. "I also knew those rules were being used to make suffering appear orderly. I changed records because every lawful door had been closed. I do not ask you to pretend I possessed authority I did not have. I ask you to decide why someone without authority was the only person willing to act." The panel ruled that Emma's actions had been unauthorized but necessary after documented institutional failure. She received no punishment, and the ruling established that officials could be held responsible for deliberately delaying emergency petitions. Vale was removed from the council, stripped of his contracts, and ordered to return the diverted funds. The victory should have brought relief. Instead, Emma collapsed outside the chamber. Grayson caught her before she struck the stone floor and carried her to the infirmary as the mate bond blazed between them. The healers found exhaustion, dehydration, and a fever she had ignored for several days. Emma had refused royal assistance because she feared Vale's allies would claim she had acted only to gain the king's favor. When she woke, Grayson sat near the door, not beside her bed. "You may leave," she whispered. Grayson rose. "I will," if that is what you truly want. Emma watched him. Then why are you still here? Because I hoped you might allow me to stay. But the choice is yours. After a moment, she looked toward the chair. Stay there. Grayson sat again without moving closer. A healer brought broth. He did not attempt to feed her or give orders. He simply read district reports while she ate. After a long silence, Emma asked, why did you ignore the bond? He could have repeated his explanation about enemies and politics. Instead, he gave her the truth. Because I was afraid that loving someone would show the world where I could be wounded. I called that fear responsibility, and then I allowed you to carry the pain of it alone. Emma turned toward the window. My mother waited 20 years for my father to choose her publicly. He was kind when no one could see and silent before his family. Everyone praised her patience. I promised myself I would never mistake waiting for love. Grayson's voice roughened. You should not. I loved you before I knew you, she said. Because of the bond? Perhaps. Or perhaps because of the man I imagined you might become. He accepted the distinction. And now, Emma looked back at him. Now, I'm trying to see the man you choose to become when no one is forcing you. Grayson bowed his head. His wolf wanted to move closer, but he remained beside the door. Her answer was more hope than he deserved and far less than forgiveness. For once, he did not try to claim more. The royal petition charter reached its final vote with the first thaw. Vale's removal had weakened the opposition, but 5 council seats remained controlled by families that had benefited from the old system. They offered a compromise. The charter could pass if district auditors were appointed by the Crown instead of elected by local residents. It would preserve stability, Lady Celeste Harrow argued. Emma stood at the citizens' table beside representatives from 12 districts. It would preserve control. The chamber quieted. Grayson sat beneath the black wolf crest while clerks counted the votes. When the final tally was placed before him, whispers spread through the chamber. The vote was tied. Under royal law, the Alpha King could decide the result. Every eye turned toward Grayson. His wolf urged him to end the matter with a command. One word from him would pass Emma's version of the charter and make him appear strong before the pack. But the reform was meant to protect people from depending on a ruler's goodwill. Forcing it through would preserve the same system beneath a kinder hand. Grayson rose. I will not cast the deciding vote. Celeste stared at him. Then the measure fails. No, the Southern Council seat must be filled before the vote continues. A noble alpha stood sharply. That position has remained vacant for years. Because an old emergency provision allowed the Crown to leave it empty, and this council used that silence to deny the Southern districts a voice. Grayson placed a written order on the table. I am repealing that provision. Within 14 days, every adult resident of the Southern districts may vote, regardless of rank. Celeste's expression tightened. You are surrendering royal authority. I am returning authority that should never have belonged to the Crown alone. Emma watched him in silence. He had refused the easiest path, even though it would have given her the result she wanted. Over the preceding months, Martha Bell had become the Southern District's most trusted representative through the storehouse negotiations. 14 days later, they elected her to the vacant seat. The elderly Omega entered the council chamber wearing a plain brown shawl and carrying 3 sharpened pencils. Her first official vote passed the royal petition charter. Cheers rose from the hall outside and spread through the city until bells rang from the southern gate to the river quarter. That evening, Grayson found Emma on the palace terrace overlooking the lantern-lit streets. You could have appointed me to the seat, she said. I considered it. Why didn't you? Because you asked for a system that did not depend on one exceptional Omega. If I had chosen you, the council could have praised you while continuing to ignore everyone else. Emma turned toward him fully. That was the correct answer. I hoped it might be. Grayson removed a folded invitation from his coat. The first pack assembly under the new charter would be followed by a voluntary celebration. There would be no rank-based seating, no compulsory presentation of unmated Omegas, and no ceremonial choosing line. I'm inviting you, he said, not summoning you. Emma accepted the card. Will there be dancing? Only if the assembly ends before midnight. It will not. Daniel agrees. She looked at the invitation, then back at him. I may come. Grayson smiled. It was not a promise, but it was an answer freely given. The first pack assembly looked nothing like the celebrations Moon Hall had hosted before. Long tables replaced the raised platforms once reserved for noble families. District representatives sat beside palace clerks, healers, merchants, servants, widows, and farmers. A public board displayed each petition seal, the office responsible for it, and the date of response was required. Children watched from the western gallery, and the main doors remained open to anyone who wished to enter. Grayson arrived without a ceremonial procession. The western wall stood empty, but this time no Omega had been assigned to disappear beside it. Emma entered after the first hour. She wore a deep blue dress made by Ruth, with a faded ribbon from her first pack ball tied around one wrist. Conversations softened as people noticed her, not because she had entered a place where she did not belong, but because the woman whose absence had forced the pack to change had chosen to return. Grayson saw her immediately. His wolf surged with relief, but he did not cross the hall or use the bond to draw her attention. He waited. Emma greeted Martha, reviewed a petition concerning school funds, and helped a nervous young clerk correct an error on the public board. Only when she had finished her work did she approach the king. "You changed the room," she said. "We changed the rules." Emma glanced toward the open doors. "Rooms are easier to change." "Yes," Grayson admitted. The assembly continued until nearly midnight. The final petition came from palace servants requesting guaranteed rest days during festival weeks. Under the old system, their request would have disappeared into a private office. Under the charter, it received a public hearing date before the board was cleared. When the musicians finally began to play, there was no opening dance reserved for the king. Couples entered the floor in no particular order, while Grayson remained beside the petition table. Emma approached him. "Are you not expected to dance?" "Not anymore. And if someone asked you, I would decide whether I wanted to." Emma extended her hand. She did not look at anyone except him. "Do you?" Grayson placed his hand beneath hers without closing his fingers until she allowed it. "Yes." They moved slowly beneath the chandeliers. He did not guide her toward the center of the floor. He followed the space she chose, while the mate bond warmed between them like an invitation rather than a command. "I cannot return the 3 years I took from you," he said. "No, I cannot ask you to forget them. No, but I can spend the years ahead refusing to become that man again." Emma held his gaze. "That is the only promise I might believe." When the music ended, Grayson released her hand. Emma did not step away. The pack had expected a declaration, a claim, or a royal announcement. Instead, the Alpha King and the Omega stood together beneath the chandeliers, within sight of the wall where she had once been invisible, sharing a silence that belonged only to them. Changing Moon Hall did not make change easy. During the first 2 months, the new petition offices received more than 1,000 cases. Several districts lacked trained clerks, noble families challenged the election rules, and merchants raised prices to recover privileges lost through the contract reforms. Emma became one of 3 temporary charter commissioners, chosen by the district councils rather than appointed by Grayson. She spent long days traveling between villages, training auditors, and resolving disputes. Grayson spent equally long days learning that disagreement was not disloyalty. They argued often. Emma accused him of moving too quickly on border taxes. Grayson warned that she underestimated the danger of empty royal reserves. During one council meeting, he interrupted her 3 times. Emma closed her ledger and walked out. He found her later in the archive room. "I was wrong," he said. She waited for the explanation that usually followed an apology. None came. "An apology without a defense," she said. "You are improving." Slowly, very slowly, their relationship grew in the ordinary spaces between public decisions. Grayson brought her unsweetened tea because he finally knew how she preferred it. Emma left corrected treaty drafts on his desk with merciless notes in the margins. He told her how his mother's death had taught him to confuse love with vulnerability. She told him about growing up in a home where silence was praised because it made everyone except the silent person comfortable. Neither of them mistook honesty for healing. but it gave them somewhere to begin. One evening, Grayson asked Emma to walk with him beyond the palace gardens. She agreed. They followed the river until the city lights faded behind the trees. Beneath an old cedar, Grayson stopped. His wolf pressed close beneath his skin, but he did not allow the bond to speak for him. "I love you," he said. Emma closed her eyes as the bond surged between them, warm and painful. Grayson continued before she could answer. "You do not owe me those words. I am telling you because silence was the first wrong I committed against you. I will not use it to protect myself again." Emma studied him for a long time. "I loved you when you were only a possibility," she said. "Then I hated myself for continuing to hope." Grayson did not move closer. "What do you feel now?" "Something more difficult." "What?" Emma looked at him steadily. "I trust you enough to find out whether I can choose to love you again." His breath left him slowly. Emma reached for his hand. This time, she closed her fingers first. The charter had changed Blackwood, but its first true test came when the Northern Alphas refused to recognize it. 3 territories threatened to leave the Whitmore Alliance unless the Royal Petition Charter excluded their lands. Publicly, they defended local tradition. Privately, they feared their own workers would demand the same protections spreading through Blackwood. The council urged Grayson to compromise because the northern border controlled vital trade routes. Emma understood the danger. "You should not risk thousands of people merely to prove your loyalty to me," she said. "This is not about proving loyalty to you. It began because of me. It began because you revealed a truth," Grayson replied. "That truth belongs to everyone affected by it." They traveled north with Daniel and several district representatives. The summit convened in Frostmere Hall, where Alpha Lord Conrad Voss sat beneath the carved emblem of a white wolf. When Emma approached the negotiation table, Voss blocked the empty chair beside Grayson. "She has no hereditary rank." Grayson removed his black royal mantle and placed it over the chair. Then, "Neither do I today." He left the royal table and joined Emma among the district representatives. Voss called the gesture theatrical, but Grayson answered with records showing that northern merchants depended heavily on southern grain. Emma then presented complaints from Frostmere healers, clerks, and laborers whose own leaders had refused to hear them. Voss's alpha command entered his voice. "I can close the border before nightfall." Grayson's wolf answered instinctively, but he remained seated. He would not turn the summit into a contest of dominance. Emma unfolded a second map. 2 eastern territories have agreed to open alternate roads. The route will cost more for 1 year, but it will end Frostmere's control over southern trade. Several northern merchants shifted uneasily, realizing the closure would damage Frostmere as much as Blackwood. Voss stared at Emma. "You prepared this before entering my hall. I learned not to enter a closed room without knowing where the other door is." By dawn, the northern territories accepted the charter's minimum protections and agreed that suppressed petitions could be appealed to an independent regional board. On the journey home, Grayson and Emma stopped on a ridge overlooking Blackwood City. "You did not need me at that table," he said. Emma looked toward him. "I needed a king willing not to make himself the center of it." He smiled. "That may be the finest praise I ever receive." For a moment, only the wind moved between them. Then Emma said, "I love you." Daniel rode far enough behind them to pretend he had heard nothing. Grayson did not claim her through the bond or pull her closer. "May I kiss you?" Emma smiled. "Yes." The council expected a royal mating announcement within days, but none came. Grayson and Emma refused to let the bond become a shortcut around the questions they still needed to answer. Under Whitmore law, Aluna held ceremonial influence, but no independent authority. Emma would not abandon her public work to become a symbol beside the throne, and Grayson would not ask her to. Together with Martha and Daniel, they drafted a new definition of the Luna's office. The Luna could chair public welfare, reviews, challenge emergency decrees, and retain any position gained through election. She would hold no automatic control over district councils, and future mates of rulers could refuse the title without rejecting the bond. The debate lasted 6 weeks. Several nobles accused Emma of reshaping the monarchy for her own benefit. At the final hearing, she faced them beneath the Black Wolf crest. I stood beside a wall for 3 years because this kingdom had a place for an Omega's presence, but not her voice, she said. I will not step beside the throne merely to repeat that arrangement at a higher level. Grayson rose from the royal seat, nor will I ask her to. He descended the steps, removed the crown, and placed it on the council table between them. This crown does not make my choices pure. It only makes their consequences larger. For generations, Whitmore kings treated love as private while leaving power unquestioned. I will not bind Emma to an office designed without her consent. The revised Luna Charter passed by a wide majority. Only then did Grayson ask whether she was willing to choose him publicly as her mate. He did not kneel before the council or turn the moment into a royal spectacle. After the chamber emptied, he led her to the western wall. Moon Hall was quiet, and the place where she had once stood unnoticed rested beneath the silver light of the chandeliers. "This is where I failed to see you," Grayson said. "I will never ask you to erase that memory. I'm asking whether you are willing to build new ones with me." Emma looked at the wall, then at the man who had once mistaken distance for protection. "Yes," she said, "but I will not stand behind you." Grayson offered his hand. Beside me, she placed her hand in his. Their mating ceremony was held at sunrise in the public courtyard. No rank determined where anyone stood. Ruth tied Emma's faded blue ribbon around her bouquet. Martha signed the Luna Charter as a witness, and Daniel carried the royal crown as a symbol of the office, leaving it on the ceremonial table throughout their vows. Grayson and Emma exchanged promises before the pack as equals. When they chose each other before the gathered pack, their wolves answered beneath the morning sky. The bond settled fully between them, warm and powerful, but did not feel like fate closing a chain. It felt like two open hands choosing to remain. More than a year after Emma stopped attending the pack balls, Moon Hall opened for the spring assembly. The chandeliers still shone, music still rose beneath the vaulted ceiling, and people still wore their finest clothes. But the western wall no longer held silent Omegas waiting to be acknowledged. It held the public petition board. Every case submitted that season appeared beneath a district seal, along with its status, assigned reviewer, and response date. Children crowded around the lower rows to find the school repairs they had requested. Palace servants occupied seats once reserved for minor nobles. Farmers debated trade policy beside council members. No one was required to attend, and no one who entered was treated as decoration. Emma came through the main doors beside Grayson. She was Luna now, but she also remained one of the kingdom's charter commissioners. Her silver-blue dress was simple, and a faded ribbon from her first pack ball was sewn inside one sleeve where only she knew it rested. Grayson opened the assembly by reading the unresolved cases. Not the victories, the unfinished work. When he reached a petition from a distant Omega district whose medicine delivery had been delayed, he stopped and called the responsible clerk forward. The error was explained, corrected, and entered publicly into the record before the celebration continued. Emma watched from beside him. "You noticed," she said quietly. "I am learning. Still slowly. Still." Later, the musicians began the old winter song Grayson's mother had loved. Out of habit, he looked toward the northern windows. Then he turned to Emma. "Dance with me?" She glanced toward the open tables, the petition board, and the people who no longer needed her to carry folded requests in secret. Yes. They joined the floor without ceremony. Around them, alphas, omegas, betas, servants, merchants, healers, and widows joined the dance while children watched from the gallery, unaware that more than a year earlier the future of the kingdom had depended on a quiet woman choosing not to enter a ballroom. Emma had once believed everything changed because she stopped attending the pack balls. That was only part of the truth. Her absence created a question the kingdom could no longer avoid. Her voice supplied the answer. The people who stood with her turned that answer into law. And the king who had ignored her finally learned that love was not proven by noticing someone after she disappeared. It was proven by building a world in which no one had to disappear to be seen. As the music carried through Moon Hall, Grayson did not hold Emma like something recovered after loss. He held her with the care of a man who understood that she remained because she chose to. The western wall stood empty. This time, its emptiness was not a wound. It was proof that everything had changed.